Hello, this is James Wagner, the Assistant Commissioner of the Colonial States Athletic Conference, and during the 2020-21 academic year, we'll use our Friday feature to highlight several members of the CSAC family. This week, we'll go back to a feature that I did back in June with Ivy Watts, a mental health expert. I had the pleasure of being on a webinar this week through COSIDA with Ivy Watts, who is a nationally renowned mental health expert. Thought we'd bring you this interview that we did back in June with Ivy, talk about different things that student athletes can do during the time of COVID-19. Tell me first about your story. I mean, how did you get involved in mental health awareness?
Yeah, definitely. So being a student athlete for my entire life, I was definitely the student athlete that looked like I had it all together, but was really struggling on the inside in silence with anxiety and depression. And it went unnoticed, and I just was too afraid to talk about it because of all the stigma that's so often associated with mental health problems. I'd always been a perfectionist and always strived to be perfect. So with that, I couldn't let the world see me as anything other than perfect. So that's really what the world got to see, that I had all of these great grades and was doing well on the track and had all of these accomplishments, but was continuing to struggle in silence. And it wasn't until after college, after struggling for most of my life, that I had a conversation with a friend after this kind of the struggle continued to get worse and worse, and I continued to feel alone and struggling with suicidal thoughts. I had a conversation with a friend who also looked like she was somebody who had it all together. And she told me that she was having a tough time too, and she was getting help through therapy. And that was one of the biggest pushes I needed for myself to really break down that stigma that I myself had around mental health problems, and then to be able to get help for myself and to work through a lot of the anxiety and self-hate and depression that I had had for so many years, that I didn't even really know what I was struggling with, or that I could reach out to somebody, or that I wasn't alone. And that was really the fear of mine. And after being able to get help, I wanted others to not feel the way that I felt. I wanted other people to know that they're not alone and that they have a voice and can use that voice to get help. And there's resources available at your school and your community, right in your home, that can help you through the struggle that you're going through. So it was really this journey for me that was in silence for so long, that I finally decided, I want other people to see that this is not how it has to be, and that, it's okay to not be okay, but there's also ways for you to be able to work through that dark time you might be in.
What are some of the things that Ivy, maybe, basically for a teammate, if you're seeing a teammate struggle, what are some of the things that you should be aware of, look out for if you're thinking one of your teammates on your team is struggling with mental health?
Yeah, for sure. It's different in this virtual space, right? But I think even virtual or in person, if you have a teammate that was always somebody who was there on time or was always super cheerful for other people, and recently for maybe a couple of weeks, they've been more withdrawn, they're not coming to practice, they're not really participating in practice, they're not doing well or performing how they used to, definitely something that you should check in on with your teammate and asking them, hey, is there anything going on? And being able just to let them know again, like, that it is okay if they are having a tough time, and being able to direct them to the appropriate resources to get the help that they might need. So recognizing if someone is withdrawn, and you can see that in a virtual sense now, even though we're in a different world right now, especially if you're doing Zoom practices or check-ins with your team, especially if you're a leader on your team. And you've noticed that, those particular student athletes, teammates that are not coming to any of those meetings or workouts together, definitely being able to recognize that that could be someone who is struggling with something going on larger than what we might recognize or see on the surface. So I think that's a really big one. Or if anyone has like a lot of really physical issues that you're not really sure what's going on, you've gone to the doctor and they can't really diagnose you with anything. A lot of times it's our body's way of telling us that we're struggling mentally, through headaches or stomach aches, anything like that can be another way. But I would say that especially when you have a good relationship with your teammates, if you can see that they're kind of away from their normal, it's something definitely to be able to check in and just wanting to see what might be going on.
Yeah, I think one of the things too is, and you may see this now, we're in this more Zoom kind of virtual reality where we're in meetings all the time, and this is how we're communicating with people, and
Right.
physically seeing people. As if you're a student athlete, obviously everything has changed for you. You're not playing your sport right now, and you're studying from home or studying finals. What are some of the ways that you can there's an easy part of it's exhaustion, mental health exhaustion comes in because you're in meetings all the time. You get to the
Mhm.
point where you're in a meeting every 2 hours, and it gets it gets exhausting. What are some of the ways, if you're feeling just mentally exhausted, what are some of the ways maybe you can keep your mental health in focus, and keep your health good while you're going through this new like virtual classroom, virtual meetings, stuff like that?
Yeah, I know. I keep hearing that word, like the Zoom fatigue. It's like you can have a Zoom dinner with some friends, which if you were doing in person wouldn't have been so exhausting possibly, but then it's, so much more exhausting online. So definitely, I think during this time, we have to make sure that we're keeping our self-care at the center of our lives. And I think a couple of ways that we can do that is definitely by talking to somebody. So if that's a friend or a parent, sibling, or a professional, and recognizing that those resources are available to you. Journaling is another really great tool to use, and something that I really value as well, and something I try to do every day. And it's a really great tool, especially if you're not yet ready to talk to somebody, and that's okay if you're not in that space yet. But journaling can allow you to let off a lot of those things on your chest that just feel really heavy, the stress and the confusion and anger that you might be feeling because of COVID-19, and because of all of these Zoom meetings. It can be just a good release. And then also just being student athletes, I mean, getting outside and exercising, moving your body, that mental health and physical health connection is really, really real. And so being able to recognize that when you move your body, not only are you keeping yourself in shape, it's also a really great way to let out a lot of that stress in a healthy way, and just to start to feel good. And yeah, so I think that that's another really great tool. Getting outside, walking, journaling, meditating is another good thing. But even though Zoom meetings can be very exhausting, it's a really great way to just stay connected with those in your circle. And that can be really important too, especially during this time when we can feel really isolated. So if you can find creative ways to stay connected with your friends, that's another great self-care technique for sure.
Is there a way, Ivy, that you as a student athlete, you were set on a schedule, and you had, okay, I had class from 9 to 10, 1 to 2, then I had practice 4 to 6. Now, since basically March, everything has just been thrown off. Like, you can do probably most of your schoolwork in the morning, and then you have the afternoon off, or vice versa. Is that something that also can affect mental health? It's just you're used to being on a pattern, and now this pattern has changed. Is there some way you can, help get your mind and body to adjust to that new schedule, especially as things become virtual, not in person?
Yeah, definitely. So definitely having that routine is a really great coping mechanism to use for your mental health. And that's something that is a lot of student athletes thrive on when they're in college or in high school or wherever they are and doing their sport. And so now, like you said, it's completely different. I think a lot of our worlds have been thrown upside down during this time. But I think another good thing that you can do is just setting that routine. So it might look wildly different than what it looked like when you were at school. But if you're going to wake up every day at 9 o'clock, you're going to have your first class at 10, and then maybe everything is over by 2 o'clock. And at that point, you are used to having practice, setting a different routine for yourself. So whether that means at 2 o'clock, you're going to put a self-care activity in, so you're going to journal, and then you're going to go outside and you're going to go for a walk, or you're going to exercise, or you're going to just do like your same practice as if you were at school, and just keep your day pretty much the same. So just if you can create a routine for yourself, I think it does allow yourself to have some normalcy put back into this situation, and allows you just to see that this is a different time, but I can add the normalcy back to it, and that can allow my mental wellness to feel better during this time.
Is there anything that Ivy, you may have seen that have come up now in this new virtual age of doing meetings and the way we do business now, that, that in mental health that you usually would not see before? It really gives you all these best practices for coaches and for administrators to look out for student athletes. Is something that has popped up that you've seen the last couple of weeks that is kind of alarming, or maybe just a little bit of a concern as far as mental health goes?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing around it is just the isolation of it all, of us being isolated from our friends and like the safety net that we had before. And it's different. It's different to be connected virtually versus having that person to hug or to lean on their shoulder and cry on. It's definitely very different now in this virtual space. So I think that the isolation has caused a lot of mental health issues to rise during this time. And I also just think that a lot of student athletes have lost a lot in the last couple of months, and losing losing sense of belonging and connection, meaning, and for many, losing a sense of identity. If you are a senior and this was all that you ever knew was about yourself was your sport, and now you don't have that as part of
Mhm.
your life anymore, that can be really, really daunting on your mental health. And even if you aren't a senior, just having that identity kind of taken away from you for this point in time, and kind of the unknowns around what the fall will even look like. So that can cause a lot of stress, I think, and has caused some concerns around mental health, specifically for student athletes in this time.
What are some of the things that maybe you can think of, or ideas are, okay, so when, everything starts to wind back up again, where, you're going back to school, you're going to start competing again. Obviously, you haven't done that for a while, and you're going to want to like do it all right away. Is there a way to avoid burnout? Is there a way to just not get overwhelmed? Like, what kind of, maybe a tips or two that you have if when everything starts to ramp back up again, so you don't burn yourself out, or you don't just try to take too much at once?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about that is to be able to develop your self-care routine right now, and having a mental wellness routine right now. If you can build this foundation and figure out what really works well for you when you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, thinking about coronavirus, you'll have this foundation that will help you when you get back into, the new routine, whatever that's going to look like with sports and school, and that new stress that comes back that might look a little different, but you felt it before, it might look a little different moving forward. So I think when we create this foundation right now, we can recognize that even though this tough time is really hard for many of us, we can create the strength and resiliency that will really help us for any difficult times that come in the future. And I think we can equate that to any hard time we've gone through before in the past. We thought we were never going to get through it, and then we got through it, and we came out even stronger. So just like this tough time that we're in right now, it's very, very tough, and it can seem like there might not be any end to it. But when things do go back to normal, you've already done this work to figure out your mental wellness and self-care routine. So then when tough times come in the future, you already know what works well for you, and you'll be even that much more resilient.
And just to wrap it up, I know I've been on your website. I enjoy your website. You have a blog. What are some of the resources that you have on your website?
Yeah, definitely. So every Monday, I post a blog on my blog, Beautifully Simply You. So beautifullysimplyu.com. And so those blog posts are about my own personal struggles, but always providing hope and positivity, providing tips on self-care and mental wellness, and really just being relatable and helping, again, to break that stigma around mental health problems and reminding all of us that we are not alone. And then I also just recently created a resource specifically around mental health support during coronavirus for students, student athletes. So it's a set of modules with videos of me and different audio of me talking as well, and written content that students can digest and go to different areas that really resonate with them. So if a student is struggling right now with loss of connection, or the fact that they don't have their sport and they've lost their identity, or they're struggling with that loss of meaning, whatever they're struggling with right now, there's content in different areas so that they can go to that content, digest it, and help them in that time. And the nice thing about these modules is they can come back to them in 6 months, 3 years, whenever feels good, even though it might not be directly related to coronavirus. There's just resources around building up your mental wellness toolkit to help you tough times in the future. And so that's available as well on my website, beautifullysimplyu.com, as well as ivywattsspeaks.com, if you go to the tab that says mental health support modules during coronavirus.